All right, I want to get started so that we can be respectful of everyone's time. So hello, welcome to the virtual youth forum presented by the Youth Leadership Council and the Youth Action Council. My name is Sydney Fletcher. I am a recreation supervisor for the Park and Recreation Department. I oversee all of our cultural, fitness, and outdoor programs, and I also oversee and am the adult liaison to the Youth Action Council. To my right bottom is Jenny Slepian. She is our sustainability and management analyst for the city of Lake Oswego, and she is the liaison to the Youth Leadership Council. Also helping with our webinar today is Jordan Morales. He is a recreation specialist and team coordinator for Parks and Rec. So we'll be on the back end, kind of helping moderate the technical side of things. Before we fully get started, we'd like to extend our thank you to our panelists and for your enthusiasm in participating in this event. As you know, this purpose is to create a collaborative dialogue between the youth of Lake Oswego and its leadership, both with the city and the school district. Today, our panelists include Lake Oswego Mayor Joe Buck, Lake Oswego City Manager Martha Bennett, Lake Oswego School District Superintendent Dr. Laura De La Cruz, City Councilor Misen Mahboob, School Board Member Liz Hartman, and School Board Member Neelam Gupta. So thank you guys so much for being here. This forum will be moderated by student panelists who will be asking pre-submitted questions of each of you. Moderators, would you mind introducing yourself to all of our panelists and our audience, and maybe just give a shout out of what school you go to, which council you're on, and any boards or activism groups you might participate in. Feel free to just unmute yourself and go for it.
I'll start. I'm Mete Bakajolo, and I'm on the Youth Leadership Council. I'm also the Lake Ridge representative to the school board.
Hi, I'm Lily Garrett. I'm a youth member on the Youth Action Council, and I'm also the youth representative for the Lake Oswego Parks, Recreation, and Natural Resources Board.
Hi, I'm Kendall Kalin. I'm a part of the Youth Leadership Council, and I go to Lake Oswego High School.
My name is Cassidy Miller. I'm a senior at Lake Oswego High School, and I'm a part of Youth Action Council and our Equity Council.
Perfect. Thank you guys. An amazing group of young people. To our leadership panelists, thank you for being here again. So the format of this event, you will all have 1 minute to answer each question assigned to you. Questions, as you may know, will be centering around diversity, equity, and inclusion as it relates to city and school policies, current events, and your plans for the future. Jenny will be monitoring time and giving you a 15-second warning when you're approaching the end of your time limit. She's got fun little flags to give you a warning. So make sure you guys have a panel view on so that you can actually see everybody as we're going through. The first hour of this forum will be dedicated to those pre-submitted questions and allowing you the opportunity to answer those. The second half will be dedicated to follow-up questions from our attendees, relevant questions that pop up in our Q&A box, or any other issue you'd like to discuss. So for the first hour, our moderators, our student moderators, will be asking you the questions directly, and then in the second half will be a little bit more free form so you guys can get more out if you need to. To our attendees, thank you for being here. We're going to try our best to answer all of your submitted questions. If there is a follow-up question or a topic that you feel needs more time or clarity, please use the Q&A feature to submit your questions, and Jordan and I will do our best to bump those up and ask those as time allows. We'll be monitoring throughout the event, and we'll be using the second half of the forum to address them. So you can submit those questions anytime. Please note that any profane or inappropriate comments will be deleted and not addressed. I have to say that. Okay. Do any of our panelists have any questions before we get started? Nope. Okay, great. Our first question is easy, and I get to ask it. It's for all of our panelists. So if you could please introduce yourself and tell our audience what motivated you to seek a position of leadership within the city or the school district. So anybody can start on this one, and we'll just go around.
I'm happy to start. My name is Joe Buck, the mayor. What motivated me to run for office was to provide a voice, to be a voice for for those who do not have one, and also to elevate voices that we traditionally do not hear from.
I'm happy to share. I'm Laura De La Cruz, Superintendent, and I first sought a leadership opportunity as an educator because I wanted to build a community and culture in which each member, students and staff, felt safe and respected and valued. And that was really born from some experiences that I had as the most important attributes to center my leadership. And as the superintendent of this school district, I carry that exact same mission with me.
I'm Liz Hartman. I have been a committed volunteer for the Lake Oswego School District since 2001 and served as a parent club president and member of the school advisory committee, worked on auctions, the annual fund, and local option campaigns. So I knew quite a bit about the school district, and I had also been active in the community as a neighborhood chair and served on the comp plan for the city. And as I attended and gave public comment at school board meetings, all 5 of the sitting school board members asked me to run, which I thought was quite an honor. And I ran and I won, and I've made every effort to be the best educated school board member on superintendent oversight and working on with the school board that I can be. And I'm very pleased to say that I was on the board that hired Laura De La Cruz.
Yes, my name is Masen Boop. I am a city councilor of Lake Oswego and a school administrator. Can you hear me? Oh, okay. So I run for this position because first of all, to serve my community where I am part of. So, but also what makes me run and serve in public offices is that we need a new vision, and we need also everybody's narrative to be taken into account. And, you know, I'm here to be part of those who do that. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Neelam Gupta. I'm the newest Lake Oswego School Board member. I was appointed this past June. I decided to apply for the board opening. I come from a place of social justice and advancing equity, both from my personal experience and professional life. I currently work at the Oregon Health Authority, which has a bold, audacious goal to eliminate health inequities by 2030. And I was really honored to be selected for my position. And I just wanted to bring my personal life experience, my professional expertise, and my volunteerism. I've been on the foundation board, I've been involved with the PTOs, and I believe in building bridges. I wanted to bring that to the school board.
I'm Martha Bennett. I like to go after the elected officials. I'm the city manager. I'm called to local government because I believe we provide basic services that all people need to live in community, and many of those services people can't provide on their own. So we're trying to figure out how to build a community vision about making sure everybody has access. I love my job between the elected officials and the appointed officials because I think there's a narrative that happens between policymakers who represent the values of our community and the folks who actually carry out the mission of the agency. And so I feel like I get to translate the vision of the elected officials into the operations of the city every day.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for that. This is a webinar full of great minds. So I look forward to seeing what you guys say. With that, I am going to turn my camera off so you'll just see the little city logo. It helps with the recording if you guys, was the flagging good? Can see the flags? Fantastic. So we're going to get started. I believe Mete is going to be up with our first question, and have a good time.
All right. Our first question is for Mayor Buck. What actions are you willing to take to make LO a more inclusive community experience-wise, rather than just looking inclusive on paper?
It's a great question. Thanks, Mete. I think it's important that all of us here, the panelists, all of you attending, recognize that here it is, Sunday afternoon, and we're all here having this discussion, which is great. All of you could obviously be doing your homework, doing other things. So many of us elected officials may not even be elected officials, right? We could be doing a regular life. So everyone here on this call, is so committed to making the community a better place, and engaging in these conversations is a great first step. I'll say what I'm committed to doing is really standing up to the status quo, and the status quo, especially in our community, has prevailed obviously for a long time. And oh gosh, that goes so fast. Okay, I'm done.
No, wait, Joe, let me be clear.
On a 1 minute time, limit. It's very challenging.
You still had 15 more seconds.
Oh, okay.
So maybe I'll use the green flag for 40 when you're at 45 seconds, and then the red flag when you're at a minute.
Okay.
Okay, so go for another 15 seconds. I'll time.
The point is, it's easy for us to maintain. To do what we've been doing is very, very easy, and most people are glad to go along with what we've been doing. So standing up to that and taking a different path is what I'm committed to doing. Thank you.
Okay, our next question is for Superintendent De La Cruz. When will queer sex be included in the sex ed curriculum?
Oh, can you hear me? Okay, great. Yeah, that is a great question. I don't know if folks are aware that we adopted a new health curriculum 2 years ago. The state of Oregon adopts a new curriculum or every 9 years. And so here in Lake Oswego, we did not adopt new materials though for quite a while because of some funding issues. And so it has been a while. But this new health curriculum is all about promoting physical and emotional health, quality health education that requires time for students to develop and practice healthy behaviors, and ensures that students from every background and identity can learn the knowledge and the skills to live their best life and their healthiest lives. And some of those standards are around demonstrating ways to treat yourself and others with dignity and respect, with regard to gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation. Some of the standards are around demonstrating respectful communication with and about people of all gender identities, gender expressions, and sexual orientations. I'll stop there because I set my timer for a minute. But I hope that was a response that was informative.
Okay, so our next question is for City Manager Bennett. What direct action will you take to increase DEI?
All right, let's see if I can do it in 1 minute. First of all, it's the mission of the city to deliver basic services to every person. I think we know that government generally in the United States, and certainly local government, we're not achieving those outcomes for all people, including people of color, people with disabilities, people with limited English. So I think I'm doing 5 things at work every day. First, I'm trying to create a mission that focuses on every single person. Second, I'm trying to create an internal culture that supports inclusion and being welcoming and being equitable in service delivery. Third, I'm trying to make sure our resource allocations reflect those values, our budget, our time, our focus. Fourth, I'm trying to use good data about how we're actually doing through the community to actually tell whether we can achieve those results or not. And 5, I'm trying to build relationships with people who've been historically left out of city decision-making so that they can be included in decisions, and so that their values, their needs, and their expression can be incorporated into city decisions.
Thank you. Our next question is for Councilor Maboop. What do you think about the vandalism and defacement on houses and public places that show support for the Black Lives Matter movement? You're muted, by the way.
It's not counting. So what I think is it's very sad to see that, but at the same time, it's a reminder that we should always be vigilant, because there are folks who think that they can use terror to prevent people from defending the right things. Those folks, for me, they don't count. And when I see that, I have my commitment to fight injustices, it kind of multiply it. I always say, whoa, we should need to do more. So what happened in Lake Oswego was not, I believed it was not Lake Oswego, and I denounced it. I was among the first one, and I think our police did a great job to catch that person. The only thing is, the punishment when it happened, oh, it's this. No, those are wrong stuff, and we need to fight. Thanks. Yeah. I'm done. Thank you.
This question,
Panelists, we're gonna go ahead and give you guys each a minute and 15 seconds, because it seems like it's a little challenging to answer these complicated questions in just 1 minute. Go ahead, Mete.
this question is for School Board Member Gupta. How is the Lake Oswego School District going to be an ally to our BIPOC community amidst the Black Lives Matter movement?
Great question. Thank you. So one of the things that the Lake Oswego School Board did back in June was pass an anti-racism resolution, in which we firmly said that we are planning to take actions. And under Dr. Dela Cruz's leadership, we have accomplished an incredible amount in the short time that she's been here. And I wholeheartedly agree with a recent editorial that she published in the Lake Oswego Review, that diversity, equity, and inclusion work is our most important work as a school district. This month is Black History Month. The school district just at our recent board meeting passed a board resolution. We have some people from our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Access Committee planning a series of activities for Black Lives Matter Week, which starts on the 1st. And we've also updated our social studies curriculum to be more reflective of diverse voices and experiences in the community. And we've done so much more than I can cover in a minute and 15 seconds, but we have more to do. We have a lot more to do.
Our next question is for all, oh, just kidding, Lily. Go ahead.
Thank you, Cassie. Okay, this next question is for School Board Member Hartman. What are you working to do in order to prevent events like racist slurs in school from happening again in the future?
Thank you, Lily. Preventing an action really requires a lot of education and culture change. The board can make policies, and we have done so. And the board has hired a superintendent who is dedicated to working with families, teachers, the administration, and students to educate them about what racial slurs are. From the school district side, we have a board that recognized the need for the culture change, and that's what we really need to continue to do. Every single incident brings attention to our district, and there's a chance that we cannot control every single aspect of our community. But what we can do is to educate for what culture we're striving for and keep working to prevent racial slurs. It's not going to happen overnight, and it is a very long-term commitment.
Now our next question is for all of the panelists, so we'll go through kind of the same way we went for that first question. And it is, what have you done personally to reflect on and actively work against your own racial biases?
Okay, so for me, this has been a lot of education. For myself, it's I think it's great how, I mean, all of you here now as high school students, you know, having this conversation. When I was in high school, racial justice wasn't something we ever talked about. It certainly wasn't any of the groups that you have now. So education for me has been really important. And then letting go of control has been the other thing. At work in my businesses, I'm a sole owner. So, you know, technically I have complete control, and that's how I'd kind of, you know, run things, as I'm the final decision maker on everything. But, you know, that's as much as I can do to educate my perspective and listen to other perspectives. I learned that I just have to let other people. So I've changed decision-making structure to bring more power to the people that work for me, and to make sure in the workplace that we are not just hearing these different perspectives, but that we're actually integrating them into the work environment.
Are we going in a particular order? I want to make sure I don't miss okay. I'm happy to share next. So I said earlier that the reason I became a leader was because I wanted to create a climate and culture wherever I am in which all of the members of that community feel safe, respected, and valued. And how that plays out for me as an educator and a leader is to work diligently toward the provision of and creating the conditions for equitable outcomes and opportunities for all. I myself pursued my doctorate in educational leadership for equity, in which the study was centered around racial justice and social justice, and the intersection of teaching and learning and anti-racism and anti-oppression of particular groups of people. I am participating right now in a 2-year national superintendent certification program that is focused again on racial justice and equity in terms of how we lead in the space of education. And then I participate in our district level offerings as well. I'm a member of our affinity groups in which we are studying about anti-bias, anti-racism. I participate in ongoing conversations with our school leaders on the same topic. We are growing our professional development across our system. And each of those contributes, that's just a slice, but each of those contributes to my continuous seeking to understand more on these topics.
Yes, you know, I think we all have biases now, racial biases. You know, I am someone who suffer from that, from as folks judging me because of the way I look like. But I reflect on that, like Laura said, when I was doing research for my doctoral degree, that's when I realized that I had some biases that I need to bracket because I was doing a phenomenological inquiry. So that's when I realized, wow, sometimes when it's a matter of race, because I was working on underprivileged children in, I don't want to say the school, but in some area in Oregon, how they fare not well. When I started the research, I realized that the question I were asking were, I had some prejudgment that the answers will be this, that they're oppressed, they're this. So I work on that. I work on my own biases also as a man, heterosexual. When I talk to other folks, I also see some that I need to work on me, not always judging people because of who I am. So yeah, it's sorry. Thank you.
So I completely agree that we're all humans who are naturally have our own beliefs and biases. And, you know, I am constantly learning and growing and evolving. And for me, trying to be a very active listener is important, to be humble in my approach, so that I can be flexible to other points of view. I've also seen in my professional life, when I first started, the discussion was all around health disparities, and then it moved to, you know, the social determinants of health, you know, where we live, work, and play affects our health. And now it's shifting even further to power. You know, who holds the power? So I've seen so many changes, and I'm constantly learning.
I'll have to say I was fortunate to grow up with a grandmother who was committed and active in racial justice issues in Portland in the 1950s and 60s. So I grew up with a little bit of awareness. But when I joined the school board, I found I needed to start attending conferences and classes that focused on education, the Oregon Leadership Network in Salem. And then I started getting involved with statewide board work and got to attend 2 national equity conferences in Washington, D.C. So you could kind of see what was going on with the rest of the United States. So I have to say, I read, I listen. When I have time, I try to attend meetings like Respond to Racism. I support the Oregon School Boards Association, who continues to bring in national and statewide speakers. But what I know is that every stage of life, we find that there's always an opportunity to learn, and I am just a work in progress.
Yeah, amen to that. It feels like every time you take 2 steps forward, you get reminded of the work that you still have to do. I guess I would say all of that. Certainly, I've spent a lot of time in training. I guess there's 2 other things I'd add. There's been a couple of very specific books I've read about white culture that, as a white person, have been really instrumental to me. The first one I read is a book called Waking Up White. And if you haven't read that, that woman goes through some stories that are just kind of nail-bitingly horrible. But I think the lessons that she learns about how white culture affects her approach to the universe is really transformative. And then, of course, White Fragility, which I think a lot of you have probably also read. And I guess the other thing I think I do actively is I try, when I find myself in a situation where I feel threatened by an idea or extremely uncomfortable about something that's being said, I try to hold myself in that moment and become curious about it. And it's been a really intentional and very difficult practice, because I actually think one of the things about white culture is that we're taught at an early age how to argue and how to debate and how to deconstruct. And what we have to do is the opposite of all those things. And so I try to challenge myself every day to be curious about an idea that I want to reject, and that helps me be open.
Awesome. Okay, our next question is for Superintendent De La Cruz. How do you plan on incorporating non-Eurocentric history education into the curriculum, and when can students expect to learn more about the non-European world?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I understand why it comes up so frequently, because we just adopted a new social studies curriculum last year, K-12. And before that, the district had not adopted new materials for 18 years due to a lack of funding. And as I said, there's a 9-year adoption cycle in the state, and this district had missed that previous adoption. But a few examples of the daily lessons currently on race and systemic racism and privilege that are delivered in social science classes include a discussion of the concept of race as a social construct, the discussion of why the racial constructs were created in the past, providing direct instruction on terminology and the concept of privilege, specifically white privilege, and students completing a personal inventory in relation to these new learnings. That's just to name a few. I want to get to that follow-up of when can students expect to learn more about the non-European world. The new standards address how actions affected different populations of people, and that is across our K-12 spectrum. And these new standards address the dominant culture and how the dominant culture has systematically prevented communities of color from achieving equal rights in Oregon and our country. And so, as I said, these are new. This is a new curriculum that was just adopted last year. And so, as with all new curricula, it takes time to completely embed it, but it is here for us and for our students. And our students should be experiencing this now.
Mate, I think your question is up next.
Gotcha. I'm going to read one question from the Q&A because there's a logistical thing going on. One question from an anonymous attendee in this call right now is, I hear there was a law trying to be passed that made it so schools could check if a student was trans. Is that true? If so, why does someone being trans affect their education? I guess either school board member Hartman, Gupta, or Superintendent De La Cruz, you can answer this one.
I defer to the superintendent. I think, I don't know of any law that's coming up here, but if anybody's heard of it, I would imagine the superintendent has.
Yeah, I have to agree. I too have not heard of this law being coming on board or being developed.
And Mete, if it is, we're gonna fight it. No one can create law to exclude or threaten anyone. We will stand up and say no. So, yeah.
Thank you for asking that question, Mete. Our next question is for Mayor Buck. And with your new leadership role, what are your future plans for the city?
Okay, so in my minute, go over broad strokes here. In general, I think a future Lake Oswego is in ways like the Lake Oswego we know today, right? With great, with safe neighborhoods, vibrant business community, and a place where people can recreate and children get a great education. But changes I'd like to see is in the future, a Lake Oswego that has housing open to all income levels and all stages of life. A business economic development model that centers around providing opportunities for traditionally marginalized communities to enable them to grow a business here in Lake Oswego. That's something that's personally very important to me. And a retail environment that's centered around providing a diverse population with an array of products and services that meet those needs. And also a community where residents are afforded all of the tools and education they need to live a sustainable life, and the city as an organization is also a leader in a model in sustainability. Thank you. Good question.
Our next question is for school board member Hartman. It is, how are school systems making school more inclusive to everyone?
Thank you, Cassidy. Well, first, schools had to admit that they were not inclusive to everyone, which was an extremely tough action. And once that reality set in, then the work could begin. So if you're referring to our school system, one of the actions we took was to pay for an analysis of how the district served our special education community, completely opening up to hear what was going right and wrong. I believe a few other districts have done this since, but a decision to evaluate what you're doing always comes with anxiety from those who are being studied and from those who are receiving the services. So the reality is, without the analysis, it's hard to make change. Our district does not shy away from hard decisions like this because the result will be better for our students. And of course, constant review of our policies, we rewrite them when it's needed, and then educating people about the policy changes is part of changing the narrative to change the culture that will help our district become more inclusive. Sorry about the lighting.
Okay, sorry. Our next question is for Superintendent De La Cruz and City Manager Bennett. Are you seeing progress in the schools and LO's DEI efforts?
City Manager Bennett, would you like to begin?
I'm happy to. You know, I always like to go last. Yeah, we're seeing progress. I think that, first of all, I think the new city council that you see elected is an indication. Actually, the school board is an indication too of progress in Lake Oswego becoming a more inclusive and welcoming organization. Inside the city, I'll say we're having much more explicit conversations and a lot of training around these issues. I think you saw us last summer do a couple things after the killing of George Floyd to demonstrate our understanding of the racialized dynamics behind policing. And this spring, you'll see us work on a community dialogue around policing to try to identify whether we can do even better than we've done so far. I will say that no change takes place without resistance. And so I also think you see that dialectic in our community where you see us have explicit conversations and sort of acknowledge what we need to do as a community to become more inclusive, to recognize the need for a more explicit racial equity strategy. But I also think we hear feedback from folks who don't think we need to do that. And so I think this is not an easy journey, it's a journey with struggle. The other thing I always like to tell people is sometimes you make 2 steps forward and then you make a step back. And so you have to build in to your system's tolerance for the fact that sometimes you make forward progress, sometimes you go sideways, and sometimes you actually have to pause or step back.
Yeah, and just to build on that, really well said, Martha, I would agree here. If we look through the lens of the school district, we've made extensive progress and we have miles and miles to go. So we have a pretty comprehensive action plan for infusing equity into our educational system that lives on our website that was just developed over the course of the last 18 months. And our schools and the district have begun learning circles that are focused on anti-bias, anti-racism as part of professional development. Our professional development over the course of the last 2 years has been expanding in the realm of bias awareness, anti-racism, social justice, racial justice, and culturally responsive practices in the classroom. And they are beginning to be led by our teachers and leaders, which I think is a significant demonstration of the impact of the ripple out across our system. We have more and more students who are involved in and leading our DEI efforts, as well as having more and more affinity groups for students who identify in ways in which they want to be together in those affinity groups, and also students involved in our, and adults involved in our equity teams and diversity councils that now are connected to our district and community DEI efforts. And I just want to remind us all, equity is a journey, and there's not going to be a time when we've all landed in this perfect place. We're always going to have to be continuing to learn and grow. And we have set the stage for that learning and that growth, and are going to continue expanding it as time goes on. But there's never going to be a time when we are in the perfect destination called equity. We will continue striving.
This question is for Councilor Moop. How would you feel about expanding voting rights to 16 and 17-year-olds in school board elections?
Wow, yeah. Oh, I feel very good. You know, all my writing, my research, even that I will talk to Dr. De La Cruz about putting even a youth council. It's on YPAR, it's youth participatory action research with parents, teachers, and the authorities, so that even in the summer we can continue to research our real lives in this community. So yes, you should vote. If you can have a driver license at 16, you should elect those who think of you. Like the question that says a law against transgender, if you are not there, you won't be able to fight things that are going. Not only you should vote, and I'm glad you are represented there but you should vote. People who decide for you, you should vote for or against them. And I support it. I will volunteer for it to pass. It's something that, and it's not only here, you can find it in some states. There are some cities that already allow that. So yes, I am 100% behind that, and a campaign should start. Thank you.
Okay, so our next question is for School Board Member Gupta. And this question was also mentioned in the Q&A. So our question is, ableism is normalized in our school halls. How do you plan to include students with disabilities in your activism? And the question in the Q&A is, how is the city making school more accessible for people with a disability? So,
do you want me to respond to both questions?
If you have time to respond to the Q&A question, you're able to, but we can start with the one about how you plan to include students with disabilities in your activism.
Sure, yeah. I'll tell you that, you know, I used to co-chair before I joined the school board, the district's diversity, equity, inclusion, and access committee. And we had 2 student representatives, one from each high school. And the committee decided that it wanted to increase the student representation so we could be even more grounded in student voice. And as a result, we decided to double the number of students. And it's been so valuable. So I absolutely am a strong believer in centering around student voice. I know that the Student Services Parent Advisory Committee has considered adding student representatives to it. I'm not sure where those conversations have gone, but you know, I think we need students involved at all different levels, including, you know, considering adding them to the school advisory committees that exist at each school. I know that Superintendent De La Cruz has convened a student committee or a student advisory committee as well to include students we don't usually hear from.
Our next question is for Mayor Buck. What does it take to dismantle the structures of racism, inequities, and social injustices?
Well, you know, well, this is a good question. When I saw this, you know, to me, the fact that we have at, you know, the national level, when people who are elected that do want to disrupt the current systems, that want to create the kind of change that's needed. This is change to our tax structure, big change to our tax structure to redistribute the complete inequity of wealth between a very small number of people and virtually, you know, everyone else. When they want to disrupt these systems, these folks, these national leaders, right, are termed activists. You know, they're seen as on the fray, on the fringes, and even other leaders push them, you know, to these kind of fringe categories. And it should not be that way. This should be the norm. And so what it takes is a country, all of us, really willing to vote against our perceived self-interest and reinvestment in housing, a reinvestment in health, and a reinvestment in education, so that people around this country can see the wisdom in making these choices.
Okay, our next question is for City Councilor Mbu and School Board Member Gupta. How will you aid in the expansion of student voices, and how will you include students and youth in decision making?
Neelam, you want to go or you want me to go?
I can go. I mean, I think this builds off of my last response. And I mean, I think it should be students from all walks of life. You know, I would love to see, for example, students, you know, who are differently abled be involved in the implementation of the special needs evaluation that was conducted a few years ago. I think that would be great. You know, I think there's so many ways in which we could potentially involve students, and we're just starting to do that. I just think about, for example, students who started a Black mentorship program and how much demand there's been for participation in that. It was just started by some high school students for elementary and middle schoolers. And, you know, the more we can do that, the more we can, you know, just listen to our students, because they're the ones who are living the day-to-day experiences, and they're the ones who often, you know, have the best ideas.
Yeah, and also like what I say, and really I want to work with Mete, with most of the people, and if the superintendent and the school board, they allow me, I want to develop the idea of the youth council, where youth, because you folks are scholars, you know your problem, we can have problems in the city and we make research, like we develop, a teacher can be the head of it, but we are all co-researchers. I'm not coming there to say I am the researcher, we are all. The teachers are co-researchers, you are, and that's also another idea, to develop teachers as researchers, as intellectuals, not just as teachers, that as we know them now. Like, so I'm very happy to work on that, because we need to hear from you, because most of the time the good ideas come from the youth, because you know, you are the future, you have the things. Nothing, we should never build a school without you putting your perspective. How do you want it built? We should never build a classroom or buy some equipment without your input. And that's, I believe in that. I think it should start early on, and yes, I thank you. So
This question is for City Manager Bennett. How can individuals incorporate social justice and anti-racism into their daily lives?
Mete, when I saw this question, I thought it's not fair because I have no idea. But here's what works for me. First, you know, there was an article in the New York Times before the election that shared that the #1 predictor of whether someone supports gay marriage isn't their partisan affiliation. It's whether they know somebody who is gay or lesbian who's in a committed romantic relationship with another person. And so the first thing I say is the #1 thing we all can do to become better social advocates is make sure we get to know and understand the lived experiences of as many people who are different from us as we can handle. I think once you get to know people and their lived experiences, you can't ignore the things that happen in society or the things that happen in social structures or in institutions that have excluded your friends. I guess the second thing is I've always framed equity and racial justice as it's a mission issue. You heard me say that before. It's also a prosperity issue. In places in our country where they've been explicit at identifying ways to create more equitable communities, they're actually more prosperous. And so if we could frame it not as a moral conversation, but rather as a conversation about our prosperity as a community and a nation, I think we can bring other people along with us.
Thank you so much. Okay, our next question is for School Board Member Hartman. How can you address diversity in the online classroom, and what steps are being taken to ensure equity while online?
Online classrooms are a little bit new to us, so we all may have a different idea of what diversity and equity looks like online. Our board instructs the superintendent to lead with equity, diversity, and inclusion in mind. And in that sense, the board redefined the district mission to be a learning community dedicated to creating a culture of belonging and educational excellence, with a vision to inspire students to be critical thinkers who are empowered to contribute positively in a complex world. So in that sense, whether students are online or in the classroom, The district will be seeking employees with the intention that it reflects our student population. And while equity online may be a broad question that has a lot of facets, I would focus on our constant education of teachers who deliver the education. Most were not trained to teach online, so they've needed new resources and they've had to learn how to teach online. So no matter what, addressing diversity and taking steps to ensure equity doesn't have a one and done answer. It's just constantly part of our decision-making process.
Our next question is for Superintendent De La Cruz. What are you doing to represent community feedback in public policy or programs?
Thanks for that question. Yeah, we have spent extensive time listening across our system. I know I spent probably 6 to 8 months last year in listening sessions with our parents across our community, as well as community leaders, community members, students, and teachers and leaders in our school district as well. And we also gathered extensive community input to help us determine the best ways to spend the monies that we were going to be receiving for the student investment account. And then we've also engaged in partnerships and dialogue with community organizations such as LO for Love, LO Change, Respond to Racism. We are developing a Parent of Color Roundtable. We have just had our inaugural session or meeting with the Student Superintendent Advisory Council, which we're actually planning to expand slightly. And of course, we offered empathy interviews and SRO listening sessions to inform our thinking and planning on that topic in terms of the SRO assessment. We are planning a community equity summit so that we can all come together and continue sharing and learning in 2021. We have engaged in extensive surveys at the school and district level, focus groups for students and adults, and as I said, listening sessions, but also I just had listening sessions at every elementary school because I wanted to really truly hear our teachers and staff and their perspective on returning to in-person school. And I'll have secondary sessions coming up next. And all of these inform our policies, our All Students Belong policy, our anti-racism resolution, which I specifically incorporated student voice into, our decisions, our practices. We shape our practices around that input, such as restorative discipline, restorative justice, restorative practices, which we are incorporating community input into. The fact that we have expanded and continue learning about culturally responsive practices and our day-to-day operations are all impacted by our community's input. And then finally, the culmination, which Director Hartman just referred to, our strategic plan is shaped around a culture of belonging and has prioritized a culture of belonging. And that is consistent with what we heard our community wants.
Thank you. Our next question is for Mayor Buck. How will you create policy and protocol as it relates to DEI?
I think the superintendent just answered this question really well. It is all about listening. You know, I think for us as city leaders, we're going to be doing a lot more listening than we are talking, and also through training and education. So recently, the City Council gave our city manager the direction to hire an equity manager who will be on the city team to help us through this process, to manage this process. The city is also convening an DEIA advisory board to also, provide a diverse community voices, an opportunity to help guide the city on policies and practices as it relates to DEI. And we're also engaging in training the city council level at the city leadership level with staff, and as well as training for the resident members of our boards and commissions as well. So to put the policy to put policy and action together, it's really representative. We have to listen to voices in the community, and that's really where this work will begin and grow from. Good question.
This question is for City Manager Bennett. What have you learned from the most recent racially driven instances around LO, And is there anything you do differently if something racially charged happened again?
Well, first of all, I think we've learned this summer from a lot, because there's been a number of racially motivated instances this summer, that a lot of the acts that people have undertaken are done to intimidate and make people afraid. And so the first thing I would say is that the city stands in solidarity with people. No one should be the victim of an anonymous complaint or a deer head dropped on their front lawn. So I think the first thing we did right in all of those instances is call them out as wrong and express our support for the folks who are victims. The other thing I would say, I think we've learned from a couple of the incidences is that proving something, even though Oregon has bias crime laws and hate crime laws, proving something is a bias crime is really hard. The evidentiary standard is really high. And so it can feel really like a strong victim or a disconnect for the victim to learn that the person who committed the act is not going to be charged with a certain kind of crime because the evidence isn't there. And so I think one of the other things we could do is we can work with our legislators to make sure how we categorize certain kinds of acts in our state in terms of expression when they're designed to intimidate somebody are really clear about what fits into different categories.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question from the Q&A right now because I can't view the PDF, but this question will be targeted for Hartman and Gupta. So the question is, this question is directed towards Mayor Buck and the LO City Councilors. Sorry about that. What can our community do to pressure Clackamas County Commissioner Mark Scholl to resign? Are you interested in working with the Youth Leadership Council, Youth Equity Council, and Respond to Racism to possibly lead an informational event protest towards this issue?
Yes, so personally, Joe, as Joe the person, right? I've been spending a lot of time. Some in my family say too much time focused on Commissioner Mark Scholl. They're getting worried, so it'd be great to have more help. There are, for those of you who don't know, Commissioner ran in two separate races, a primary and a general election, was elected. After the election, was found on his personal Facebook page to have years worth of racist rants and conspiracy theories and xenophobic comments, and you name it. It's horrific. It is horrific. So virtually every single elected leader now in the whole Portland metropolitan tri-county area, school boards, water boards, garden clubs, everyone is called for this guy's resignation, and yet he's still there. And it's very damaging. The role of a county commissioner is very powerful. And so, the short answer is yes. And there's lots of organizing being done. So anyone who's interested, if you contact me, Councilman Boop, we can help connect you with the infrastructure that's in place that's really leading the charge. And there is a lot of good stuff that can be done to help move this. Thank you for asking about that.
This question is for Councilor Boop. How can youth in LO get involved with social justice and current events while still staying safe during the pandemic?
Yeah, like one is what Mayor Buck said. Mike Buck is not someone who should be in leadership. And I forgive him. He targeted people like me, but I know those are things we cannot carry hate. Hate is never gonna fight hate, but love will. And I love that guy. I told him I'm ready to have coffee with him, but he needs to go. You guys, you folks can do something. Start on your Facebook pages, tell your parents, tell everyone in the schools, even the schools around the Clackamas County should call for one day. For example, 1 hour on Facebook to ask for his resignation. And I continue, what you can do, you start at your homes, because social justice is also all the problem we have. It comes from our schools, our homes, and in the society. So call out your uncle if he's being racist, or your aunt, or even anyone, your group, your friends. You can, because social justice start everywhere. Call out a friend if he's using some slur or, so yeah, you have a lot to do, but let's start with Mark, let's get them out first, and then you can do it by being, and be safe. Don't confront things that can hurt you. Don't do that. In being anti-racist, you also have to be safe. Don't call out a guy with a weapon who's saying racial slur, like in the train in Portland. So be safe. Don't go out also in protest with millions of people without masks. Don't do it. But you can even stay home on your computer and do some work. Thank you. Sorry.
The next question is for City Manager Bennett and Mayor Buck. What steps are you taking to undo racist practices and policies that were put in place 100 years ago?
Can I start, Joe?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, the stuff that's 100 years old is frankly the easy stuff because it was pretty explicit, right? And so more candidly, some of the stuff that we have in place that's more recent than that has an impact in terms of racial equity that doesn't show up. Like, let me give you an example. It's not very glamorous. This is the actual work of equity, which is a lot of the laws that we have around public contracting, where the city buys stuff from, are actually designed to make it easy to award contracts to large firms primarily owned by guys. And that's just because of the way we bid contracts and the way the law says that we have to award them. And so part of what we're doing now, actually under the leadership of Councilor Wynn, is taking a look at the way the city buys stuff, whether it's consulting services or rock, we buy rock, or cars. And are we structuring our processes so that businesses owned by women or minorities or people of color can actually successfully compete? Because that's how we in the public sector transfer dollars. Another place that we have to look is, how do we hire people? Because the way we hire people in bureaucracies really makes it tough for somebody without a lot of experience in the field to compete successfully. So the reality is that the really explicit racism from 100 years ago has sort of been hidden into systems and structures that have an impact that's racial. And so unpacking that stuff is the work we're doing today.
Yeah, that's great. Great answer. So I'll just touch on kind of another aspect where we see this carryover from years back when, for instance, if you were a person of color, you would not be able to purchase a home in certain neighborhoods in the Portland, metro area, and in Lake Oswego, forbidden. Banks would not give you a loan. Well, that no longer exists, right? But yet, families that are able to buy a home to this day in Lake Oswego are predominantly wealthy white families, right? Because now the carryover is through neighborhood zoning and such. We've created these, enclaves where the price of land is very high, and because of past and current racial disparities, people who are most likely to live in affluent neighborhoods are going to be white families. So that's what the work that the entire state of Oregon is really working to undo is looking at a lot of our zoning to provide more housing in the urban environment, more diverse housing, and increased accessibility to all income levels, and kind of as we work to reverse really what has been centuries in the making.
This next question is for Superintendent De La Cruz. What courses of action can be taken to construct an actively anti-racist curriculum which teaches students about racial equity and inclusion in the Lake Oswego School District?
Yeah, that is a great question. And we definitely heard loud and clear from our students that that was a strong desire. Lots of great things going on in this arena. We have anti-bias, anti-racist, professional development calendar that lives on our website, and so that our teachers and staff and leaders can access on a monthly, they can access it anytime, but there are monthly learning topics, and these are also used by school equity teams to conduct monthly learning circles. Principals are using these in professional learning with staff as well. We have our, as I just alluded to, monthly district anti-bias, anti-racist learning circle that started on January 27th with folks from across our system. We also have supplementary lessons that are provided to teachers and that live on our website so that teachers can supplement any lesson with lessons that are focused on anti-bias, anti-racism. We're also developing, there's a group who's working on a K-12 literacy program with the focus of anti-bias, anti-racism. Our restorative practices, implementation, and planning is occurring and being developed, as well as training to accompany that, to be trained across the system. We have an ethnic studies course that has been developed and will start as a required course in the fall. We are researching programs like No Place for Hate that the Anti-Defamation League implements, as well as a program called Narrative 4 as a possibility to improve school culture and set the ground for effective restorative practices. And then we provide $1,000 every year to every school to continue diversifying the library inventory so that our library books that our students have access to represent a great variety of lifestyles, cultures, ability, disability, and identity. We have a diversity, equity, inclusion checklist for all curriculum adoption that is to be used when looking at new curriculum that's going to be adopted. And then really importantly, we've hired a phenomenal equity and family engagement teacher on special assignment, Teresa Sanchez, who is co-leading this work and is leading a lot of this work and is getting it into our classrooms and schools. And that's the value of having the right person in the right place, but also lots of strong foundation is in place and lots being implemented right now. And again, more steps to go.
Thank you so much. This question is for all panelists, so you can just go in whatever order.
Hey Lily. Hey Lily. I think we're going to take a quick break before we go for everybody, because I know some folks might need to take a little rest stop break. So we're going to take 5 minutes before we ask these final questions, and so we can gather some other questions from our Q&A. So our panelists, if you'd like to turn off your video, you can take a quick break, do what you need to do. Those of you that are attendees, feel free to do the same. And then if you'd like to open up some questions in our Q&A feature, so that when our panelists are done answering these last few pre-submitted questions, we can get to some of the questions that you might have had that we maybe didn't touch on. So we'll be back in about 5 minutes at about 5:14. Welcome back. We'll wait for everyone to turn their cameras back on, and then we'll get started again. We've got some questions that came in from some late registrations that I have just texted to our group, and then we've got some questions in the Q&A, and then we'll wrap up with some of the for everyone questions that that we had pre-submitted. I think we'll wait. I think we're waiting on, just Dr. De La Cruz. I think that's it, and then we'll get started.
Okay, I am going to start us off with a question for everyone that we left off on. And this is, what does diversity and inclusion mean to you?
I'm happy to get started.
Yeah, okay.
I feel from my lens that diversity is about the various cross sections of how we identify as human beings. And these identities are unique to each individual and are rooted in our life experiences. Our identities can be rooted in race, gender, religion, age, education, and a host of other identities. Diversity is really personal in my belief. And then inclusion, on the other hand, really means that whatever diversity I bring to the table, the community, the school, the organization, that I can be accepted for how I identify and the perspectives that I bring. And then another level of that is actualized inclusion, which means that I can be part of this school, this community, this organization without having to give up a part of who I am to do so. So that's why we're working so hard to build a system on inclusion.
Yes, I mean, yeah, it's, I think Dr. Laura's definition means like it summed it up. That's what diversity is, like recognizing everyone as a unique individual, you know, and inclusion meaning, you know, lifting all the barriers that prevent other folks to thrive, to do things. And in our schools, still you see it. I have been in a school where some people would not be able to attend because the way the things are, they can only be on the front row, not up there, which is not fair. And that's a problem of inclusion. Everybody should be able to move around the school anywhere. So it's an example. So yeah, I think it's clear as defined by Dr. Laura. Thank you.
I can go next. I've learned a lot in the past year, and in particular by listening in on a large statewide healthcare foundation based in California that I used to work at. They just wrapped up a 10-year place-based investment, and they boiled down the lessons they learned to A plus B equals C. A stands for agency, so giving people the tools, the power at the individual, community, and family level that they need. You add that to the B, belonging, so that everyone feels valued, heard, and accepted, and then that equals C. That's what equals change. And so that has really stuck with me as, you know, really important ingredients to creating the change that we want to get to.
Okay, I'll go. Neelam, that recipe has me very hungry for some change. To me, inclusion, you know, means that people's outcomes are not determined based on their born into and or biological factors, and that those differences, that diversity, things that you know, make us all unique human beings, are things that we all treasure and that actually provide us riches as a society. That's how I see it.
And I have to come back to education because I strongly believe in public education and a very strong public education system. So for me, it means providing every student the resources that that student needs to complete a Lake Oswego education, and that every student feels valued and cared for and a part of a greater community. And I want that greater community to be one where they want to live, work, and play and return to the community when it's time to raise their family.
So I think for me, diversity is just the differences among us. And inclusion is making sure that we embrace the differences among us and let us each individually bring our entire self into whatever environment we're in. But Laura said it more eloquently than I did.
Okay, our last question is also directed to all of our panelists today, and I have my glasses on because I think my contacts were expired, so I can actually read now. And we're gonna end off on kind of the first half with how can community members best support you? And I think you can kind of, if you can, address that in a DEI sense, but yeah, there you go.
So I'll start this time. Normally I wouldn't, but I think community members, I think, first of all, I think we need to all think about what we're building towards. I think we have to acknowledge the history and the past, but I think we have to think about how do we reach to other people who aren't like us to build alliances. How do we grow the movement? And I think this means two things. First, I have to say shame and blame are not motivators. They're disempowering emotions. And so I find myself at times when something's gone wrong, wanting to shame or blame somebody, but we should all resist. And community members should help resist shame and blame, which does not mean that we don't acknowledge. And the second is that I think people are motivated by a positive vision. So when you advocate on behalf of issues that you care about, if you can describe the future that you want us all to move forward, you will build alliances with other people, because ultimately change happens because groups of people come together to make it happen, right? And so anything you can do to express what you want, what you think our community is capable of being, will help you build alliances. And we need your help in doing that.
I see Joe clicking. You can, yeah. I think, an informed community is very important. People, I think the best way for me, the community can support us is to challenge us, challenge our decisions and not, but like Manager Banner said, city manager, it's not about, like shaming us or, because I always say when I run for city council, we're not the most brilliant mind in Lake Oswego. There are many. I mean, we just represent the council. So I see sometimes in the thing like our city, our officials who are working hard, you can contradict them, but with love. We are building the beloved community. What the city, the school district is doing, it's for all the children. They are not here to hurt children or teachers. But when you see certain comments, it's like people are criminals. Even the city, when we take certain decision, when you hear, it's like no one loves Lake Oswego more than me, or no one is blacker than I am. So you can criticize me for, so it's we just want love, but also we want to be challenged. Like honestly, when things are wrong, you challenge the city, but you can do it in a very kind and very civil way, and people will listen. That's how I want people to challenge our decisions, but with respect. Thank you.
Okay, that was really, I agree with my city colleagues on this. I was going to say that, I mean, all of our decisions at the city level, they come from the community. So your participation and your involvement in that process is really what we need to support us. And the reality is there's all this that goes on, right? And really only a very, very small sliver of the community is actively engaged in what we're doing. So we only hear from a very, very small sliver. And of course, we are working, to expand, that sliver. But there's a real life. People are busy. They have their families. They have their work. People are busy. And so going to city meetings, and as we work to make them more accessible, I mean, that's definitely a piece of it. But being involved, coming, sharing your opinion, getting involved in groups. I mean, doing what you're doing right now, being engaged. I mean, you folks, all of you. I mean, you are the part of that narrow group that's out there engaged, and just continue doing that. It's so important, and that's really what we need. So when we make decisions, we need the input on the front end, but then in that we need the support there when we're doing it. So we're not, because I'll tell you, people are always much more inclined to come out and speak against things they're against than against than to speak on the things that they're actually for. So we need folks speaking in that positive way that Manager Bennett and Councilor Boop spoke of too. So thank you.
I want to follow Mayor Buck because one of my memorable conversations from this summer was with Mete. And we had a conversation where we were putting information out about BIPOC, and Mete couldn't believe when I said, I don't think all of our community knows what that means. And he said, well, they must. Everybody, is involved with this. And the truth is, not everybody has the same language and not everybody has the same knowledge. And what I really would ask community members to do is to become educated and understand what are all the things that we're doing. And part of my job is to make sure that community members understand those kind of things. And that we have to keep up with today's students who absorb information in a different manner than adults do. And that students need to understand how other generations learned. So it isn't always just community, it's also generational. And I know we used to talk about lifelong learners, and we really don't talk about that much anymore. But being a lifelong learner means being open to new information in a changing world, and that it's important for our community to understand why the issues we're talking about are important.
I can go next. I think this year has been so challenging, to really get input. And I worry sometimes that we're not hearing from the people who are most in need. And that really haunts me and keeps me up at night. But I do feel that I'm so grateful for Superintendent De La Cruz's leadership and her really active and proactive attempts to hear from segments of our community that we usually don't through the Superintendent Student Council and doing proactive outreach to families when we were having our school reopening discussions. But, I just think we need to become more creative and really think more intentionally about how we engage with families and communities.
Yeah, I really agree with so much, everything actually that's been shared so far. And I would chime in that from the district perspective, what we need in terms of community members supporting us is partnership in a spirit of unity. And we need folks to be willing to respond and participate, especially folks that are in our focal groups. An example of that is how many different ways we asked for input regarding the SRO assessment. And we did that primarily because our students let us know what an important topic this is. And we had quite a few less students participate in those than what we wanted and hoped to hear from, even with multiple calls for participation. I also wholeheartedly agree with what Martha Bennett said earlier about shame and blame and judgment. And I believe Ms. Sen also noted this. Those will honestly get us nowhere. They will stop the conversation. It's so easy, I believe, to critique and to criticize and to make assumptions, especially easy to do so on social media. What's harder to do and more meaningful and productive is to come alongside us on the journey, seek to understand, and be willing to be part of the progress efforts. This is a community effort. No one organization can change an entire community. We have to do it together. Perceptions are shaped oftentimes around the dinner table, and that is where they can be reshaped and reformed to ones that are open and more receptive as well. And I'm noting that a lot of the questions that we get, including tonight, are about the what, and I would implore our community to be asking ourselves and each other about the how. How can I help? How can we collaborate? How can we build on each other's good work and progress? Neelam just mentioned this, and I'll say it a little bit of a different way. this has been an exceedingly difficult year. And what our community needs moving forward from the district level to the broader community is healing and progress on every level. And in order to do that, we're going to have to do it together. And so I'll end where I started, which is what we need is partnership and a spirit of unity.
Thanks to all of our panelists. That wraps up the first portion of the assigned questions. Now we're going to be moving on to some Q&As from the audience watching right now. The first question for this part comes from Zev Green, a high schooler at Lake Ridge High School. Zev asks, this question is for Mayor Buck and Councilor Massen, Councilor Moop. The police department receives the most funding out of any other city department. Will the city look at reallocating some of those resources to better fund social services and make said services more accessible?
Yeah, folks, it's I can respond for all the people, for example, who has the slogan defund the police. I don't go there. For me, what is important is what our police is doing. And it's I am in a school that think that the police is not the problem. The problem is the system we have. The police, they come from your house, from our house, it's a system that we need to dismantle if we want to avoid all this. What the police is doing is what people are doing at the counter for Black people. We show up in a shop, they see us with the biases of we are stealing. So I don't believe in that. And I think the police in Lake Oswego is doing a wonderful work that I noticed. For example, last night, I met a new police officer when I was retrieving my mail with a person. And I said, I'm gonna wait, what is going to happen? I even asked for her card. It was wonderful work. So I don't have if the police is given more than any other, I don't agree with that. The police should be treated as all other agency. So far, I don't have that. I'm meeting with all the agency in the city. If I see something that's not fair, we will fix it. But we should not just target the police. We should target the whole system. And that's where I'm coming from. It's not like it's about the schools, it's about City Hall in general. I'm the first Black man elected here. It's not the fault of the police, it's a society. So I want that to think like that. So if I agree the police should not go respond to mental crisis. If they are funded for that, we should take those funds and give it to people that can do that work. But what I won't accept is people target the police as, oh, the police, without saying, oh, the shop guy or the restaurant guy or the school system, the classrooms. That's where I come from. So sorry to be so long, Joe, yeah.
Just jumping that we're embarking on a community discussion around community policing, and we're starting that process here this next month in February. So there will be opportunities for everyone to participate, both in a large community event as well as in focus groups. And so that's another area where we need help ensuring that we have the robust participation in those focus groups and that we're hearing as many different perspectives as possible from people who not only live in Lake Oswego, but also work in Lake Oswego, travel through here, do business here. So that's a chance for us to really hear and best evaluate again what we've heard Ms. Bennett and really the rest of the panel saying this whole time. We want to ensure that we are responsive as a city to the needs of the community and seeing the most equitable way that we can provide those services. And again, the first step goes back to the listening. So that's the stage that we're embarking on now, and we learn more as we go from there.
Thank you so much for those thoughtful answers. We have another Q&A question, and any panelist can answer. Is the school system trying to talk more about the injustice towards others in and outside our city? When there was a hate act towards a BLM sign, only one of my teachers mentioned it at all.
Yeah, I'm happy to begin a response to that. I believe that, well, first I want to say that it is always heartbreaking when any student or group of students have an experience that is hurtful. And I know that there have been some historically wounding experiences in our school district that we are working very hard to heal and progress toward an anti-racist organization. I do believe that LOSD is making genuine efforts to become an anti-racist organization and is working together with the community and continuing the learning among our teachers. I understand that there is some mistrust and divisiveness between members of the community and the school district in terms of when it comes to dealing with racism. However, our school leaders are extremely passionate and authentically invested in leading schools toward greater anti-racism, and we are all striving, and I believe acting in ways that are demonstrating greater transparency than perhaps has ever been demonstrated in the history of the district in terms of racist incidents. I can't speak to which teacher did or did not speak to a particular incident, but I know that our leaders are encouraging our teachers, and our teachers are encouraging each other to learn more about how to address topics. We are providing, supplementary lessons for teachers and professional learning about how to address incidents that occur in ways that are culturally responsive and sensitive and trauma responsive as well. We're really working toward uniting our efforts and the efforts of the community so that we all can rally around this same goal to be transparent and authentic and real about incidents as they arise.
Yeah, I mean, if I can add, as an educator, it's I recommend teachers to read a book that's called Teaching to Transgress, Bell Hooks. And, teachers should be intellectual. Unfortunately, our teacher education is not very performant. We want to see teachers should not be neutral. When they say teachers are neutral, teachers should challenge the big narrative that's happening. And that's what I was saying when we talk about the police. No one has signs to go to schools and ask the teachers or the school district to be this and that, but we all focus on the police or on some other things, and the places that are more dangerous than the police. So for me, a teacher it was an event that teachers should talk about in class, that it's hatred, it has to come. But teachers also are scared. They don't want to take you talk about it, you can be fired because student goes to their home, say the teacher says this and that. So that's very complicated. It's not also always the fault of the teachers. It's our society that needs to soul search so that we allow our teachers to teach normally and do the right thing. So it's
Okay, one of the questions is, this can go to anybody. How are elected officials working to make sure that police respond to situations reasonably and without bias in Lake Oswego?
And I think this is going to be our last question to panelists for the night.
Martha, Joe, or I. What I can respond honestly.
Well, this question's for elected officials, but I could get you guys started if you like.
So last night I went to retrieve my mail at the post office in my PO box, and I entered. I even forgot my mask, but then I ran back, get my mask because it's so when I entered, I found old lady with the police. Neighbors called the police to come check. someone maybe they think is homeless, and I found the police was telling her, and I just was kind of eavesdropping because I say, I need to sit here, something can be wrong. But the way the police was talking to that lady was so respectful that I really commended and say, I hope that this is what we are doing all the time. And he was telling her, to the lady, you're not in trouble. You haven't broken any law. I just come here to help. And I was there sitting longer to check. I did it on purpose to just, and once they're done, I entered my car and sit and wait for 15 minutes. And when she came out, I went see her. So, just to say that biases, the police, all the killing of people that look like me, it's based on biases. The city, all we can do is train people. But if people come and have their biases and do it, sometimes what we need to do, and I'm always saying it, is all of us in our houses, in our classrooms, in our groups, we teach love. And our children, when they grow up, the job they will use those things. So it's easy to just say, this is how it is. But what the police is doing, that's what other folks are doing somewhere else. I agree, we need to work on the police big time. And people who know me know that I'm interested in that work. But I just don't want it to be centered there. We won't solve anything if we just center on police and forget the schools, the families, the churches, the mosque, the synagogues. All those are ideological apparatuses where all the problem we have in our society, they stem from there. Sorry, I wish I could talk more, but okay.
Hey, so yesterday I had a water issue at one of the businesses, and so it's the weekend, so you actually have to call the police dispatch about the water, but they dispatch for everyone. So it's a water issue. Well, in this case, because it's a water issue, someone from the utility department, they came out and they're great, right? So it's the utility person comes out and they're helping, and they solve this water this water issue. But for virtually anything else you may call that line for, regardless of what it is, right? We're going to send the police officer to respond, and that is just how Lake Oswego and so many other communities all throughout this country. If these are the folks, they are on the road, they are going to respond to whatever the heck issue you are having, whether your cat is stuck in a tree, whether you're the victim of a property crime, whether, whatever it is, they are the ones. They are the one who has a car and they are driving over to you and they're going to respond. And so this is what we're embarking on now, is looking at, well, is that the response that we want to deliver, or do we need more people like the water utility guy? When you call and you say I have an issue with the water, I don't want a police officer coming over. I want someone who can actually work with these pipes and fix the problem. So we want to send the person that has the tools and the training, and that's a very special thing. The person that comes knows what they're doing. They know how to troubleshoot, and they know how to solve the problem. The thing is, there's such a large array of issues we see in the community. Our kind of first line there ends up, being the police department. We've seen examples where that was not not necessarily here in Lake Oswego, but we have seen examples. We're all familiar with examples where it doesn't. Those are not great outcomes because we're not providing the right tool to solve that right problem. But I can assure those and whoever asked this good question that City Manager Bennett and all of the folks, our police chief folks, we have really, they're good people who become police officers. And there's going to be, like in any job, there's going to be bad people as well. But we don't want to. We want to be cognizant that we want to keep those good people, and we want to recognize that they set out to be public servants. Like many of us ran for office, like like the other professionals on this call went into their life being in the school administration or city administration, right? They went in to help people. And so a lot of people go into these professions. And so we have to approach this in a way that recognizes that they're all humans, feelings, and a lot of them set out to do really good work. And so we approach it with that sensitivity, and we don't want to do in general. We don't want to paint anyone with one big broad brush, right? Just like we don't want to paint one racial group, one religious group, one ethnic group, or one professional group, right? We don't want to paint anyone with one big, and that's what makes the work challenging, right? Because we're not going to stereotype. So we have to dig in and just know that it's what we're all committed to doing together.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm back. It's now nighttime in this office. Before we wrap up, we actually got a Q&A question for our student moderators. So before I kind of give the details of this wrap-up event, I wanted to be able to give them an opportunity to speak. So the question is, how do students feel about the DEI work project in schools, or I'm assuming within the city? So any of our student moderators, if you'd like to speak up, now's your time.
I can start. I think as a senior having been in the district for, I don't know, since I was in 4th or 5th grade, it's hard to say there's a ton of progress that's happening from the whole span of my time here, because I was not paying attention when I was younger. I think students are a lot more are paying a lot more attention now, especially with a lot of current events that are happening, and also that comes with age. And so in my opinion, having kind of seen a lot of the work that this school district has been doing, I think there is a lot of progress that's happening. I think it's just not being shared with students very well. It's a lot of behind the scenes and stuff happening on websites and really, really awesome stuff. I know Dr. De La Cruz talked about Ms. Sanchez, who's a teacher on special assignment this year, and getting to like work closely with her and some other people has been really awesome to see all of these things that are happening, but it's just not reaching a lot of students. And so I think a lot of people probably wouldn't have that same answer. But yeah, I think to sum it up, there is a lot of progress happening, but as I think City Manager Bennett was saying, it's 2 steps forward, and sometimes you have to pause, sometimes you go back, sometimes you go sideways. So
yeah, to build onto some of that behind the scenes stuff that Cassidy mentioned, as
you're muted.
Oh, okay. Okay. As a school board representative, I've been kind of working with a lot of people on this call right now about like what's been going on behind the scenes. And we had such great discussion about like the anti-racism resolution and the new curriculum rollout in like history classes. And those are all like very great initiatives that go into like spreading DEI. And I agree with Cassidy in that a lot of those initiatives don't really make it a lot of the time past the school board or district leaders to like reaching the students in a like very meaningful way. So I think that like there is a lot of progress going on behind the scenes, but a lot of students still want to see some more upfront action, like taking more serious action against like students who commit hate crimes, and just making sure that like some hate crimes are inexcusable in the Lake Oswego School District, and a lot of students just want to see kind of proof that the district really believes that more than what's on paper.
I completely agree with everything that Cassie and Mete have just touched on, and just like being in the Lake Oswego School District for my whole like educational life, as like a younger individual, like in my elementary, middle school years, I had like thankfully had like parents and a home life who educated and taught me, you know, like the right and wrong when there are like these like very like racist events going on in our world. But I felt like in our schools, those are silenced in a way that conflict doesn't occur. And like I think Ms. Sen brought up earlier, like teachers often are neutral or don't like speak upon anything, even if there are like really like gravely wrong or like hateful things going on in our school district. And I believe like that making our school a place where teachers and students can speak on things that occur in our school district and beyond freely and like in a positive sense so that we can try to prevent those from happening in the future is a really important thing. And I've had like many teachers this year, even online, and we've discussed like issues that are occurring, and those discussions have been so meaningful to me, and like they've been the most memorable parts of my school year. So I think making like our school district a place where you can have open conversations and students can like directly address when they feel like their needs aren't being um, supported is something that we really need. So I think there is progress, but there's a lot that I would really like to see more in our school district.
Yeah, I agree with everybody that has talked, and I just like growing up in like a Oswego school district, I haven't really been paying attention, but recently with all the current events and stuff, it has really brought to my attention on how important all this is, and like this year, especially talking with teachers, like Lily said, and having open discussions have been helpful in classes. And then I also feel like I've seen more like students wanting to get involved as well. Like I've seen more clubs opening up and people wanting to share their opinions and expressing that. And so, yeah, I do still think there's progress, but I think there's been progress made.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. This was so special. This was such a unique way to be able to get this conversation started. Huge thank you and props to both the Youth Action and Youth Leadership Councils. This was their brainchild. They led the whole thing. They chose all of our panelists, date, time, format, everything. And we just scheduled the webinar. So you guys are fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you to our panelists for being here. I know those of us that have like a Monday through Friday 9 to 5, we were probably like Sunday, but I think that we got a lot of participation, especially with the audience that really would have wanted to attend this. So thank you so much. As you guys can see, we've been recording this. We are going to be posting the recording as soon as it's done downloading to the City and Parks and Recreation YouTube channel. And when that's posted, you guys will be able to view it. I know that there are a few folks on some of our advisory boards and some parents that really wanted to see what everybody had to say. So they will be able to do that and get that opportunity. And I have a feeling this is going to be kind of a popular thing. So if you get another invitation, don't be surprised. But other than that, we hope you guys have a fantastic evening, and we will see you on the other side. So thank you so much, unless you guys have something else you'd like to add.
One more thing for students who are listening. I had a question just about how to get involved in Youth Action Council and Youth Leadership Council. There's Instagrams for both of these accounts. LO Teen Lounge is for Yak, and LO Youncil for Youncil. And so if you guys are interested in kind of joining one of those groups next year, applications kind of roll out in the next couple of months. So keep an eye on those pages, or you can connect with any of the moderators who are here right now. So yes, thank you everyone.
I didn't get that.
Oh,
could you try again?
Sorry, Siri.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Have a fabulous night.
Thank you.
Thank you.